anyone can make someone tired, right? And this is something I try to explain to my players, is that I can grab anyone from the street here and come in and say to them, you need to get these guys fit. And I say, what do you think they'll do? And a lot of the players are like, they'll probably just make us run and run and run and run till we're tired. And I'm like, exactly. But at the end of the day, have you gotten better?
Sports science, strength and conditioning, high performance coaching. Welcome to the Decoding Excellence Show. Today's episode is brought to you by Vald Performance, the makers of the NordBord. If you haven't checked out their website yet, I highly suggest you head over there, whether it's return to play, injury prevention, or just plain performance testing. Vald Performance has the tools that you need. Check them out at valdperformance.com. Today on the show, I'm joined with Derek Salvador, the owner and director of sports science at Athletic Solutions, Inc. Currently, Derek is the head of strength and conditioning for the Oakville Soccer Club, Power FC Academy, KW United FC, and GPS Canada Academy. Today on the show, we discuss enriching kinesiology students' education by involving them in the practice of strength and conditioning and different modalities. We discuss his experiences working with different football academies, ranging from U10s to U20s, and the differences in teaching and pedagogy that he has to employ to teach a 10-year-old versus a 20-year-old. Later in the show, we start to discuss different books and mentors and resources that we've used to enrich our own coaching journey. This is a wide-ranging conversation with a coach who have seen all along the spectrum of a long-term athletic development model. You do not want to miss this show. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Coach Derek Salvador. Derek, welcome to the show.
Hi, Adam. Thanks for having me aboard.
Hey, I wanted to I want to thank you for participating and agreeing to come on the Decoding Excellence show. I know sometimes scheduling with both of us can be kind of crazy, but I'm finally glad that we can find a time to sit down and chat and share your experiences. How are things in your neck of the woods?
In our neck of the woods, it's not too bad. We've had a pretty mild winter so far. I was kind of hoping winter was almost over and done with, and then on Friday we got some more snow. So hopefully that'll be gone soon. But everything is good. Just working away as always, such as yourself. And things are good. Can't complain.
And I'm trying to think. So number one here at Wichita State, and probably even during my graduate experience, assistant experience, I never really got out of the country. But the only other country I've ever been to is Canada. But what parts of Canada do you reside at?
So I live just outside of Toronto. So I live in a small suburb. It's a small town called Georgetown, and which is about 40 to about 45 minutes outside the city. Not too far away and stuff. I do a lot of my work in Toronto still, so that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Oh, fascinating. See, growing up in Michigan, we would cross the bridge and we'd go into Windsor, which at that time they literally was there was not much of passports needed or anything. You could literally just cross and declare and whatever. And but that was my only sort of experience being in Canada. So I need to make it up there for a conference or two next year or so. But
yeah, absolutely. Well, the interesting thing is that I did my undergraduate degree at the University of Windsor. So all the Americans used to come in across the border on Friday and Saturday nights. It kind of rings familiar a little bit. Yeah,
I mean, like I've been in those. That was probably us back in the day, so I can certainly relate to it. Hey, I'm so excited that we could finally get on the phone and have this interview, because I think the work that you're doing is exceptional, especially when it comes to what you're doing from an athletic development standpoint. And even though, in the beginning of the show, we talked about what your bio and we talked the intro of the show, but I'd love for you to give the audience just an updated bio in your own words of what you're currently up to in your current position, and then we can kind of expand on that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So doing a bunch of different things, which kind of keeps me busy, keeps me on my toes. And as of right now, day is I work as I'm an instructor at the University of Toronto in the Faculty of Kinesiology and Physical Education. So it's a really, really unique kind of course that we teach. So the way it works is when you think about when you did your undergraduate, you went to class, you sat in a lecture, you were given all this information, and you kind of went and wrote an exam, and kind of that was that. And really, what are you doing with the information? What does the information really mean? How do we put it into practice? And based on the courses that I help teach, I work closely with a professor named Dr. David Ross, and we pretty much try to bring the learning to life, which is really, really, really cool, or at least I think it is. And so basically what we do is we try to take all the concepts that we are learning in kinesiology and physical education, and we try to put a practical component to it. So depending if we're talking about agility or plyometrics, if we're talking about coaching, if we're talking about movement variability, if we're talking about physical literacy, all these different terms that are thrown out there. And we try and do activities where these concepts come to life. So now the students get a better understanding as to what it is they're learning and how we actually put this up into practice. So I kind of do that throughout the week. I teach first, second, and third year students, which I guess coinciding with how the college, U.S. college system is, it'd be like teaching your freshman, your sophomore, and your junior classes. So we do that. So first, second, and third year, and then in the evenings is where I do my own training. So I'm involved with a bunch of different projects. So I work with one academy in Toronto called Power FC, and so I work with their U10s all the way up to their under 20 groups, and I also work with an initiative here that we started in Ontario where they're trying to raise the level of standards of soccer in the province, and it's a program called the Ontario Player Development League. And so I work closely with Oakville Soccer Club and with other various of their teams. Another academy called GPS Canada, and then other that, throughout the summer, I work closely with the USL PDL team, which is called KW United, which is an under 23 team here in the province, and working with individual athletes on top of that. So pretty much, I get up at 6 a.m. and I don't come into the house sometimes until 10:30 at night, and then we do it all over again. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
I think if you were to isolate either of those roles and just hold an academic position and post, that is a full-time job in itself. And likewise, the evening position as far as the consulting and working and training and development with athletes, that's also another full-time role. I can certainly kind of relate to the time demands of both. Man, you are a busy individual for sure. I'd love to kind of kick around a couple different topics as we go through this, because I think you have certainly an experience that can discuss the science behind the athletic development. And I think that is a needed issue that I'd love to address in the show. But to kind of maybe draw some ideas as far as how you got into sport, I'd love to, because again, as I've talked to other professors and I've talked to other academics, for a lot of people, it's not always, they've gotten into it because of, either a rich history of sport or their backgrounds. But for you, why athletics? Why this sort of emphasis in kinesiology, exercise science? How did it lead you into that academic position?
Well, if you think about it for myself, is growing up as a kid, I was always involved in sport in some way. And I guess I can thank my parents for that. I remember my dad, always active. Even up until his final years, going to the gym all the time, trying to stay fit and things like that. And it really, really rubbed off on me a lot. So as a kid, growing up playing soccer a lot, that was kind of my main sport that I played. But, growing up as a kid, it was, we played street hockey after school every day. And, we played basketball and we played football and we played baseball. So there was always it's always about being active, which is something I always found fascinating, something I always really enjoyed. And then even kind of going down the path that I am now is what was interesting was when I was 16 years old, I fractured my ankle in a slide tackle. And so I had a cast on, couldn't play. And then the cast finally came off. And I went to physiotherapy. And I was like, wow, how cool is this? If one day, because at that just kind of 16, you kind of figure, you know what, I'd love to be a professional athlete. But with the opportunities that were available at that time, my chances of going pro were probably slim to none. So how can I still somehow be involved in sport and all these kind of things? And so then all of a sudden it's like, okay, this is kind of a cool career where I can help treat individuals who have suffered some kind of injury and stuff. So eventually, playing career kind of came to an end. And then, mind you, I still was able to continue playing competitively for, until I was in my mid-30s and stuff, which was quite impressed with, you know what I mean? But it also, kept thinking about, preparation and nutrition and how do I look after myself so I can still compete with, players who were half my age, right? So again, it's then, just kind of led me down the path where I am. So then it became about rehab. And then from rehab, it was, working closely with the population that I was working with. And, how can we help integrate a lot of these injured athletes back into sport? And then, from there, it just kept evolving. And I'm like, okay, hold on a second. Why is it I'm trying to be so reactive? So why is it I'm trying to address how I can integrate these injured athletes back into the sport? Maybe I need to look on the other side. And, what is it that we can do to try and, maybe reduce these types of injuries so that way these people can spend more time on the field, court, ice, wherever, learning their sport and not so much, on the injured side of things. And then from there, just, the whole academic thing and just trying to learn and looking at the science and what's behind the science. And then also looking on the other end with the art of coaching. What does it take in order to implement all that science? And, kind of when I saw the role that was available at the University of Toronto, it was really interesting to be able to try and blend the two where it's like, essentially trying to provide all students with the experiences that I had experienced. So basically, how can we take all the science that you're learning and how can we make an art of it? How can we help you implement it? How can we teach you about, all the different clients you're going to potentially be working with one day? How can we help you guys kind of create your own role where you can deal with, maybe you're working with corporations, you're implementing wellness programs. Maybe you're working with youth development where you're implementing, physical literacy programs. Maybe we're looking at active for life programs where we're trying to keep people of all ages, active for throughout their lifespan and stuff. So when I look at that whole spectrum and kind of like where I was at, kind of what I've learned and what I want to do, it just all seems to mesh me. And I guess the big thing is, I don't want it to be cliche, but, it's about passion. It's what really fuels me. It's what keeps me excited. And you know what? Like, what job isn't great where you can go and be active every day and you can, be kicking around a soccer ball every single day, and interact with individuals where you can really influence or have an influence on some part of their life. Right. So I guess for me, that's kind of like what keeps me going and how it got me involved and what keeps me involved in everything that I do.
What's interesting to me about your background is both the academic side of it and being instrumental into teaching other teachers, essentially teaching other future teachers or practitioners the protocols and the sort of the art or perhaps even more accurately, the science of what we do, but then to take it one step further and start to integrate that into a learning environment. And that's something that, I'm hoping here in the next couple, at least spring 2018, that we start to try to do at Wichita State is to sort of blend our athletic department in what we're doing from a strength conditioning high performance program into teaching the academic side of it as well and making a strength and conditioning 400 level class or something like that, because I think that's sorely needed. How, with that, I mean, you talked about it in your bio a little bit about blending the two, which I think is fascinating. What, how are you doing that? I mean, like, what is sort of the basis of a classroom setting and then trying to go into teaching the various modalities or differences of physical preparation to the students that enroll? I mean, what if you could put me sort of in that class right now? I mean, like, and paint the picture of it. What's that look like?
Yeah, so like I said, I worked very closely with one of our professors at the university, and essentially what it is that depending on what the topic is, or depending even what the course is entailing, you would come into class. And then essentially we would have, so the students get their workshops ahead of time, so that way they can review and they can get an understanding of the concepts that we will be discussing. And from there, what we do is we sit down and we will give them a little bit of background information. So if the first 15, 20, perhaps even the first 30 minutes of the class will be some sort of a lecture component. We're kind of giving a little bit of a background to the students. So say, for example, we were talking about plyometrics, so this would be a first year course. So with plyometrics, we go into discussion on what makes an exercise, truly plyometric, and we try to give them a little bit of a better understanding as to what it is. Because most people will assume that, plyometrics are only, jumping based exercises, right? So trying to really have them have a better understanding as to what that is. And then from there, what we'll do is we'll start getting into some activities or some exercises where now the students can start to experience a little bit about the stretch shortening cycle, looking at different progressions. So how can we do some sort of jump? So say we're looking at a squat jump, we're going to only focus on the concentric. So say, for example, in order to take advantage of the stretch shortening cycle, you have to have, individuals who have some level of coordination, but also some level of strength too, to be able to tolerate the demands of the exercise or of the loads being posed on, on their bodies. And so how can we start from base level? And so let's talk about the concentric contraction portion. We will work through that. Then how do we integrate the eccentric component of that? And then from there, how do we combine the two? And then from there, how does that affect performance? And if we jump too far too soon, can that impact performance negatively? And so the students will work through these different activities. They will take pre and post scores. And then from there, we will have some discussion questions where then now we will discuss it as a group, and not so much, and what's really important here is not so much on what the right answer is, but what did you as a student just experience? So base your answers off of what you just went through, right? And what your colleagues went through or your classmates went through. And then from there, we'll lead into a summary, kind of like, how we wrap everything up. And then we'll have some transferables. So essentially we'll have some content pieces. So some content that, things that we want them really coming away from today's lesson. And then a transferable where something that we discussed or how we discussed it or how it was taught or the coaching that the athletes went through with each other or the instructions that maybe I might have provided ahead of time, maybe the instructions I didn't provide ahead of time, and how did that impact their learning and how they can relate that to things outside of class. So we also want things to be not just about kin and phys ed related, and also not just about in-class related stuff, but how can we take those concepts and then apply it to other areas outside of the classroom. And the big thing is that, what we've realized or what we see is that, with a lot of people who come in to do, kin or phys ed, is what are you going to do with your degree afterwards? And apart from doing physiotherapy, occupational therapy, or going to med school, what else is there for you to do? Or what else can there be for you? And I guess that's important because when you talk to most of the students, it's like, well, what are you going to do after you graduate? I'm going to physio school. I'm going to occupational therapy school. I'm going to med school. Or the fourth most popular answer is, I don't know. Right? So what can we do with all the information that we're giving you, and how are we putting it into practice? But then how can we relate all those practices to outside of the classroom and relate to whatever it is that you're going to be doing in life? So that's kind of like how our classes are how they go and stuff. And I think it's a really, really unique way to learn. And then we try to address all the students' different learning styles. So, some learn by doing, some learn through experimentation, others learn through, just through, visual or verbal. There's so many different ways. So we try to address each individual and hopefully we try to enhance their learning environments.
I think there's so many good things in what you just shared as far as a listener taking away and looking at sort of the pedagogy structure of this classroom, because I can certainly relate as in undergrad kin courses back then. It seemed like, here's the textbook, let's read the chapter, but no real hands-on applied sort of teaching, right? Which, as you look at different learning styles and different students, right? Some, exactly as you said, learn by doing, some learn by reading, some learn by seeing. And I think having that real world out of the lab applied aspect only enriches the education, enriches the teaching moment. So that's and I also think what you guys are doing brilliantly is that you're applying sort of not only the modalities in which you're discussing it, prior of it, but you're applying it in what is otherwise a real world scenario. Because, so often in coaching, and this is sort of which will lend us to our next topic of the art of coaching, it's dealing with the chaos that arises in real world athletics. And it's not a laboratory. There's not a structured protocol that you're following necessarily when your team reports to a training session and their bus was late, or they stayed up late because they had to miss a flight because of weather delays. And those are the things that they won't teach you necessarily in a textbook, that you have to navigate as a coach as you learn and gain experience in the field. So I think that's instrumental that you guys are teaching that.
But I think what's even one step further is that, again, it's the experiences that we're providing our students is that, like, I don't know about you, but when I grew up, I was 14 years old and I had my first job. I used to clean cars on the weekends, and you would have to interact with customers. I'd have to interact with my boss and fellow workers. And a lot of students now, as I notice, is that some of them going out into some kind of a placement at the end of their college, university, some of them maybe early 20s. That's their first work experience, and to me, it's like what we're also trying to give them is like, here you're going to be doing a presentation in front of the class. Here's your chance in order to present yourself. And it's much more than just about the material presenting, but how you actually present it is very important as well. And then on the flip side is when the student acts as part of the audience, we want you guys engaged, but we also want you learning how to ask good questions in order to, for clarification, for intrigue, to bring about good discussion. And there's so much to it that, like I said, just apart from even just the material, is just really trying to provide them a lot of experience so that when they do go into the real world, it's like, hey, I've done this already, and this isn't new to me. So again, it's just trying to just give them experiences, and again, from all the years that I've been working, and just the years of things that I've made as mistakes, and trying to share a lot of my personal stuff. So then to them, it's like, we're not just giving you stuff to do for the sake of doing it, but everything you're doing, this is what I do every single day. And if you're working in this field, you're not going to be working in a cardboard box. More often than not, you're going to be working with other people. So how do you relate to those people? How do you find their passions? How do you engage with them? Because one strategy that you use for one person isn't going to work for somebody else, right? So it's just this whole just trying to relate to people, like you were saying earlier, building rapport. There's so much that goes into it, and I guess when you're going through it to them, sometimes they don't see that. But from our end as instructors, it's like this stuff is just so valuable, and I'm really, really excited about the direction that we've taken, because I just think that it just provides so much more for our students than just like, here's a textbook, here's some information, go off and learn it, write a test, good luck to you, see you later, kind of thing.
I relate it to a story that I share with my staff all the time, as far as coaching goes, right? Like, the parallel I make is to a musician playing an instrument, and our instrument just happens to be the science and the understanding of how to train athletes in whatever modalities that we select. That's the prerequisite of it, right? Like, you need to know how to play the instrument. But ultimately, for me, what gets me fired up in the morning is seeing sort of the crowd respond to the instrument, and which lends itself to the art of coaching, which is essentially building engagement, building buy-in, getting them excited, the athletes, about the session. And that's, for me, that's just like a natural high. I leave the weight room, thrilled that the athletes have bought into a program. but very rarely do I ever see in an undergraduate or graduate level kinesiology courses is that art of communication and that rapport building and that buy-in and that engagement, which has been something for me post-collegiately that I've had to study through resources and books and podcasts and audios because, like you said, I mean, most of the students will leave university or leave high school and never even have really a human relationship or communication with a customer or another coworker or someone like that. Where do you think, you said that a lot of that course as well was sort of built and formulated around the audience learning how to ask good questions. And where do you think in your experiences, the mentors or the resources that you've cultivated and curated, was there anyone that stands out as far as mentors or significant particular resources that you refer back to that shaped your ability to ask good questions and to build that relationship with the athletes and the coaches that you work with?
Yeah, for me growing up, like with mentors and interactions and just things that have helped shape me, I think, maybe not knowing it back then, but I think and knowing so now, that obviously every interaction you have is going to shape you in some form or another, whether positive, negative. You can always learn something from those interactions. And I remember growing up, or even when I was in my mid to late 20s, is again still trying to figure out my path and trying to figure out what it is that I really wanted to do. And the thing is that I had a mentor who, from a knowledge and hands-on approach, was very good. And it wasn't until years later that I realized that a lot of the message, I guess, sending or just being a good person or just being a humble person wasn't as good as it should have been. So some of the advice I remember getting is that, hey, you've taken this course, you shouldn't share the information that you've got because that's what's going to make you better and that's what's going to do. And I remember struggling with that in the beginning because I was like, I don't know what that means, because to me it's, if you're sharing information, you're making other people better and it's going to help make you better and maybe, lead to some kind of discussion or things like that. And not realizing that mentor actually ended up not being a good mentor to me, which kind of helped me to what I guess I hope I'm making sense when I say all this, but with some of the mentors I ended up getting later on is just realizing how beneficial they were for me and actually made me understand what made them good mentors. And one person that comes to mind is a professor that I work with closely at Sheridan College, was a guy named Trevor Cottrell, and he's been great, and he really helped shape who I am today, just with, providing me with a lot of experience, giving me a lot of good advice, helping with resources that later I would, dive into and kind of learn from, but also to be, to really question what it is that we are doing and to never be satisfied with just, to really try to dive in to find out what people are doing, and not necessarily, and this is what I mean by trying to help our audience to become, better at asking good questions. But it's never to go in to try and make someone feel insecure or to really question what they do or to put anyone on the spot and try and make them feel, not as knowledgeable or to try and make them feel dumb, I guess, in a sense. But it's to, let's really dive into what it is that you did, because I'm really, truly fascinated with what you're doing. And maybe by me trying to really question some of the things that you're doing will help give you more verification as to why you're doing it, but then will also help us go into this interaction where maybe we can find an even better way to do it. And so I guess, helping both of us to become more knowledgeable on the topic, and then who knows where it leads to afterwards. So like I said, Dr. Trevor Cottrell was a really good mentor. So a gentleman that I'm working with right now, Dr. David Frost, he's been a really, really good mentor as well. And just honestly, I just find a lot of the interactions I have with a lot of my fellow coaches, like a lot of people that I hire now, I bring them on board because I want them to be better than me. and I want them to be better than me, so that way it helps me become a better person. Because at the end of the day, I'm not doing anything extraordinary that nobody else is doing. We're all kind of doing the same thing, but how can we all, make each other better? How can we make this industry better? And even this interaction that you and I are having now is that, I'm really as interested in knowing about the things that you do as you are about me. And from there, it's like, how can we learn from this? How can we build from this? How can we, look, he mentioned this. Well, let me try that next time I'm doing something like this, or this is this approach or something that you had with your athletes where you're like, we were trying to implement this and it wasn't working. So here's a strategy that we used, or vice versa. So I guess for me, that's kind of, the whole full circle as to why we're really trying to teach these students, how to ask good questions, how to be engaged, what does it lead to afterwards? Can it lead to some intrigue and knowing what each other's doing and thinking? And again, it's with these courses that it's not just about me up there instructing. It's not just about me giving them all this knowledge, up front, but through their interactions, and their discussions, what can they teach each other? And the class is almost kind of built in a sense where that's what we really, really encourage, because we want the students to kind of take charge of their own learning. And, we may have some structure as to things that we need to cover and things that we need to, to go through and go over and things like that from a content point of view. But, where it leads to after that is really up to the students. And if they really grab the opportunity, and really take charge of it, it can lead to so much more for them. And that's something that we're really hoping that they'll come to understand.
Yeah, when you were talking about, and you made crystal clear sense to me, but I think to expand on it a little bit, when you were talking about mentors, both maybe demonstrating both good characteristics, classically good characteristics, and bad characteristics, I think it's important to realize that regardless, it's still a learning opportunity. I mean, I've had some really great people in my life that's done some exceptional things that, in reflecting back on it, I said positively shaped my life. And then also, and maybe just as equally important, that there's people that's done things in hundreds of different ways, or communication, or whatever it might be, that's made me only upon reflection say, there's a better way of doing that. I'm going to make sure that in my future that I go a different course, or I do a different path. And I think that's just as powerful as a mentor sharing, the successes that they've had, that the tried and true sort of ways of doing things. But I think sometimes that can be lost if you're not taking the time or the white space to reflect upon maybe that there is a better way of doing things. So I think that's a powerful statement that you had, as far as just being aware and kind of aware that there's, I think there's no difference between sometimes that, the good qualities, the good things that mentors do, and maybe some of the bad ones, the bad things they do. With that said, as we go into this, I know that with your position and your work of at Power FC, U10s to U20s, I mean, that's a huge age gap with a wide varieties of different physicalities, different sort of physiological sort of states that each athlete are in. So it lends itself to a nice kind of transition into maybe some of your work from a long-term athletic development standpoint to the differences of communications. I mean, I'd love for you to share a little about sort of your experiences working with this U10 to U20 sort of range for some of the coaches that might be listening to this show that don't have the experience working with, anybody outside of 19 to 22 years of age, because they fall outside the collegiate realm. I mean, what are the big things, the big experiences, the differences, your overall sort of experience working with this wide ranges of athletes?
Yeah, it's challenging. It can be challenging. I'm not gonna lie. There's nothing fancy about it. Sometimes it is extremely chaotic, where you want to pull your hair out. And then there's some days where like it is awesome and you come away with some amazing moments. And I guess the big thing is that, you know, what we realize is that, and I'm sure you can speak from this, is that anyone can make someone tired, right? And this is something I try to explain to my players, is that I can grab anyone from the street here and come in and say to them, you need to get these guys fit. And I say, what do you think they'll do? And a lot of the players are like, they'll probably just make us run until we're tired. And I'm like, exactly. But at the end of the day, have you gotten better? And I kind of really hope that they understand that message I'm trying to give them, because then what I try to explain to them is that, no matter what it is that we're doing, I am never going to waste your time. And everything that we are doing has a purpose. I want you guys becoming better. And the way I try and word it to them that they get a really good understanding for what it is that I try to do is that I tell them that, where is it that you are going to become a better soccer player? And I really try to pose a lot of questions on them, and I want them to answer me, because I want them to be a part of the process too. And it's kind of, they'll say, well, I learned better from being on the soccer field. I'm like, exactly. I said, will you get better if you're sitting on the sidelines injured? And they're like, no. And I said, okay, so that's kind of where I'm coming in, and that's where I'm starting from, is let's focus on things that are going to keep you guys on the field so you can do what you love, right? And at the same time, maybe help you become a little bit of a better soccer player. I'm like, the stuff that I teach you, I can't guarantee that, but I will give you all the tools that you can apply to your sport and in order to help you become better. Now, when you're talking to your under 20s, this conversation goes a lot better than when you're talking to your under 10s. By this point, 2 minutes in, not even 2 minutes in, I've already lost them. They're, ready to jump all over each other, and they're doing whatever it is and things like that. So now it's like, it's awesome, because sometimes you walk in there and it's like, holy cow, like by the time I'm done, I've got a throbbing headache, but it's awesome when you see how much energy they have and just the things that they're capable of doing. And then again, it's coming down to, key features. So what is it about movement that we are trying to ensure with every exercise? And then we think about movement patterns. And then we think about, fundamental movement skills, and thinking about physical literacy, and just having an understanding now that, kids aren't as active as you and I once were when we were younger. I remember we were talking off earlier when, as a kid, I didn't have any of these video games or tablets, and we played sports. We played street hockey, we played football, we played soccer, we played basketball, we played tag, we played hide and go seek, we played Red Rover. There was all these different things that we did that we just gave us all these abilities to develop all these different movement skills and become proficient with movement and stuff. So with those age groups there, it's kind of like, okay, if I think of a professional player, I think of maybe that's kind of the finished product. Maybe not necessarily, because they always have something they can work on, but maybe that's the finished product. And then from there is, how can I divide it up into different age groups where it's like, this is what we're striving for. And, again, thinking about, like I said earlier, physical literacy, and thinking about movement variability, and just adding constraints and taking away constraints, and just all these little different things where now we give them even abilities to solve little problems. And when we're doing exercises, I may even impose different instructions. I may give them a lot of instructions up front on, this is how exactly I want you to do it. But there may be other times where it's like, what? I'm not going to give you any instructions. I'm going to show you once how to do it, but then I want to leave it up to you to kind of figure out. And that way you can learn a little bit more, your body, you can learn how your body moves a little bit better. And just by providing them a lot of education, give them a lot of opportunities to just, self-discover, right, I think is so beneficial. And maybe that more of that approach is on the younger side of things. But then as we progress, things become a little bit more structured. And now there are specific things that I need them to focus on, because, again, once we hit the U20 age group, which is usually a lot of our U17 players, a lot of these players are now getting ready to head off to college and college programs. So it's basically trying to instruct and get the fundamentals down packed. So that way, when they come to schools such as yours, a lot of these athletes are ready to go, and they have so much movement variability. They have a good movement vocabulary, and now they're just ready to go and then start to excel a bit further.
Yeah, I think I can certainly relate to the age gaps in some respects, as this was maybe my first semester where we've conducted an LTAD camp for youth volleyball athletes from ages 18 to 14 is one group, and then we have a 10 to 14s. And you hit it right on the nail. Your ability to capture an attention of a 10-year-old, you have about 30 good seconds, and then it is then they're pulling hair out or playing with the sand or running around or completely lost focus. So I'm always looking at that as, like a coach I respect. I mean, from John Wooden and his ability to clearly communicate with crystal clarity in the fewest words as possible to deliver sort of a movement outcome. I think I can get away with explaining the what, the why, the how with 22 to 18-year-olds, and then a little bit less from 17 to 14. But boy, by the time you get down to those 14 to 10-year-olds, it is your verbal cueing as a coach has to be spot on, because you don't have that time delay or that attention to detail as they certainly age and mature a little bit. And I love the fact that you talked about, or at least providing these athletes a medium of self-discovery. And I'm curious, I mean, I think in the age of sort of, obviously of being a parent, but in the age of helicopter parents, I mean, I don't know if self-discovery is as proficient, as rampant as it used to be, back in the 80s, the 90s, the 70s. I mean, what are your thought process? I mean, as you're providing this open space for them to sort of work these strategies out initially without any coaching early on, do they struggle with it? And if so, why do you think they do?
You know what, Adam? I think it's amazing when you actually empower them a little bit. And to me, it's like, I always tell the kids that no matter what, when we do our strength and conditioning work or fitness work, I have 3 rules. And the first rule is you have to listen. So when I'm speaking, or if any one of the other players is speaking, we all have to listen, right? Because then I always tell them, when we listen, what happens? And then, most of them are like, we learn. I'm like, great, that's what I want. So the second thing is you always have to try your best. And I explain to them that, with that, I'm going to give you a lot of things that you may have never done before. I'm going to give you, activities to do that you might not be very good at, but all I want you to do is try. And if you try, you might see something amazing might happen. And then the last rule I usually tell them is that, we have to put a smile on our face. We have to have fun when we're doing all of this. And based on that, that's what I always tell them. As long as you try, I don't care. So for example, some things is like, hey guys, you know what we're going to do right now? Cartwheels. And some kids are like, I don't know how to do cartwheels. I'm like, you know what? I don't care. I'm like, figure it out. I'm like, have fun with it. Look at how one person does it and just try to do it yourself. And if you can't do it, think of maybe a different way you could do it. And just let them do it, right? And eventually over time, they figure it out. Or, you know what, guys, we're going to do somersaults today, or we're going to do some kind of crab crawl, or, what they absolutely love is they love relays, right? And I'm like, awesome, because then it all becomes about he cheated, no, he cheated, we didn't cheat, he cheated. It's amazing, right? And then you kind of joke around with them about that. But again, it's like, how can I put all these little different activities into each little station part of the relay? So how can we work on some hopping? How can we work on, some skipping movements? How can we work on some quadruped movements? And even, for example, I'll say to them, okay, here's what you have to do. Here's a ball. You need to get this ball from point A to point B, right? You have to have both feet and both hands on the ground, and I don't care how you get the ball there. So some of them will do a front crawl where the ball is in their stomach area, and they'll get it from one end to the other end. Someone might do it where they're trying to do some kind of a bear crawl where now all of a sudden the ball is in between their legs. And then by looking at each other, they kind of figure things out. Maybe someone comes up with something different. But again, at the end of the day, it's just here's a little problem that I'm going to give you, and I want you to figure out some way to solve it. And I don't care how you do it, right? But I might give them some little restrictions. I might keep it completely open, and just let them have some fun with it without someone telling them how to do it or that you're not doing it wrong or get mad at them or anything like just, you know what, guys, just experience this. And then, because then you do get some parents who are like, well, wait a second. I thought I sent my kid here for soccer. Why is he doing all this other stuff? This isn't soccer stuff. And that's where now you have to have that dialogue with the parent and even the coach to say, you know what, like the soccer stuff, that's your domain. I'm not going to tread upon that. But you know what, let me work on some different types of movement skill. Like I said, fundamental movement skill. We look at different types of movement patterns, just trying to build their movement vocabulary. So now when they are presented with some kind of problem, they've got all these different ways on how to figure that out. And I think by doing that is just, it just lets them have fun. You know what I mean? No one is telling them what they have to do and how to do it. There are times where it's like, again, you have to be careful with how much you give them, because then it can get out of control really fast. And it's like, okay, guys, hold on a second. Everybody come on back in for a second. What were my instructions? Okay, let's try and do this again. And then sometimes, you have to, sometimes it's like, hey, you know what, guys, everybody leave here, go run a lap around the field. And as much as I hate to do that, sometimes you need to just hit the reset button. And it's like, okay, everyone comes back, let's start again. And 45 minutes can go very fast sometimes, and sometimes 45 minutes can seem like 3 hours. And but like I said, it keeps me on my toes. And like we talked about earlier, is that any type of like interaction like that just helps shape what the next session is going to be like, and how can we keep building off of all these things. And instead of just kicking a ball, can we throw a ball? Can we, all these different, there's so much endless possibilities with these guys, and that's why I have so much fun with them, is just because you can throw anything at them, and a lot of them are really excited about being given the opportunity to try and learn and do something new.
I think back in like 2010 for myself was the moment when I started to program a little bit more movement variability in with some of our basketball athletes. And what I found is that these guys could do amazingly athletic things on the basketball court, but struggled to do a somersault or do a cartwheel. And it just shows that there's a huge lack of movement variability or vocabulary for athletes that sort of assign, and we all know this, I think, at least in our profession, our field, but that sort of prescribe to, I'm going to do AAU basketball, and then I'm going to move into summer basketball and fall basketball, and then I'm prepared for my winter season, and that there's no other sort of medium or outlet for them to learn about different fundamental movements that all support and engage them on the basketball court or in your environment on the football or the soccer field. I think it's something that's sorely needed, and why I've seen, certainly with our LTAD sort of camp, is that the athletes that move the best in our weight room, when they're coming in as freshmen, and I'm like, hey, you score really great on our movement screens. You're really gravitating to the progressions that we're prescribing for you. Do you have a background in any other sport outside of, say, tennis, or outside of whatever sport they're here to play? And most of the athletes will say, I've done, I was in gymnastics as a kid, or I did rhythmic gymnastics, or some sort of, other sport at a higher level. And I think that movement variability only helps them exceed. And as we know through early specialization and injury probability and injury likelihoods of it, I just find that fascinating that there's still this sort of approach to, from a parental standpoint, from a coach standpoint, to be resistant of prescribing different movement variability and different skills.
Yeah, I think too, what's really important, Adam, is if you think about is that, we are both in like a performance related field where, maybe more so on your end because of, the collegiate level and just having to get the results that you need to do. But also from my point of view is that, I also have to somewhat get these results as well. And because there's a whole, other factor side to things. But at the end of the day is that, like you said, you may have that collegiate player right now who, like I said, they play spring ball, they play summer ball, they play, collegiate ball, then they play whatever it is, they're playing basketball constantly. But what happens when those 4 years are up? What happens if they don't get drafted or they don't continue to play the sport after that? Is now what is left of them? And at the end of the day, like I'd like to think of it as, how are we also making sure that these people, stay active for life? So how are we ingraining these good habits where now it's not just about playing the basketball or playing soccer or about anything. It's about, how can we just keep them active? So now, again, building on all these things of physical literacy, how do we give, these athletes the confidence, and the competence in order to do other things? So say, for example, it's like, they're with a group of friends now, they're in their work career and they have a group of friends now that join, have a volleyball team. And this is this person's way of staying active. Well, if they're not developing some of these skills on the front end, then maybe this is something that doesn't appeal to them because they just don't have that confidence or that competence of being active. And now all of a sudden they don't engage in these activities. Lifestyle has changed and maybe now they're not as healthy as they need to be, right? So at the end of the day is that how can I help that? How can I make them excited about physical activity? Not necessarily just about the sport, but just about being active in general, right? Because I know for my age now, it's I don't play as much soccer as I did, and now I need to find ways that I can stay active in order for myself to lead an active lifestyle. Now, is it going for a walk? Is it now shoveling the snow on my driveway? Is it mowing my lawn or raking my leaves? And just going for jogs or now that I cycle, I get on my bike and I ride and just doing different things now to stay active. All the time.
To build on that, what's so important too, for most athletes, their collegiate career will end and they probably won't have a professional career that bridges on afterwards. But I think it's so important too, if we were to look at our positions and our jobs holistically, to make sure that we are teaching and we're empowering and giving them the tools to then be able to carry on these skills for the rest of their life. Not only the athlete development standpoint, from a physical standpoint, but I've always told and demand of our staff that when an athlete leaves, they should leave with their degree in hand, championships rings in the other, and a whole toolkit of knowing how to eat and how to sleep and how to take care of their work-life balance or their academic, social, athletic sort of domain balance. They should know how to recover after tough physical activities and to use a wide variety of different modalities. They should know basics of applied sports psychology and how to defeat negative self-talk and how to use visualization and how to meditate. And if they don't, then ultimately the student hasn't learned, and therefore we haven't really effectively taught them those things. So I think it transcends just the 4 years that they're here in university, but it should be a toolkit that they use for the rest of their life, whether or not they're in sport or they're dealing with a tough time in the business world that they're in, or in a family as a father, as a mother, as a daughter, as a son, whatever it might be. They should have the toolkit and the skill set to be able to employ those strategies at any time.
Yeah, I think that's really important too. Exactly what you're saying, and then just building even off of what you just said now is that I may be an instructor at the University of Toronto. I may have my own business, Athletic Solutions Incorporated, which is where I do my strength and conditioning. But if I were to wrap all of those roles up, I'm an educator. And that's what I do. Like I teach people, constantly, and exactly it's all the things that you just brought up. And it's even as it's even the youngsters that I work with my under 13s that I honestly last week I had, an amazing moment with them where, all the things we're working on, I give them a little bit of education up front, and I question them and I want them to learn at the end of every training session. I'm like, okay, guys, what are some of the things that we learned today? And I don't want them to understand that we're doing exercise just for the sake of exercise. We're not using these modalities just for the sake of using it. But these are the important things that we need to understand when we do this. And what was awesome was one of the kids brought up something where one of their coaches or something gave them an exercise where it had crunches. And they were kind of given this fitness challenge, and they had to do all these crunches for so many months and things like that. And they're like, hey, when the coach gave it to them, they're like, hey, wait a minute. Coach Derek said we shouldn't be doing crunches because it's not necessarily safe for our spine. And, is there anything else we can do? And I'm like, this is an under 13 kid who has just said this. And I'm like, and he wasn't the only one. There were several others who came up to me afterwards, and I'm like, this is amazing. And I'm like, so guys, what do you think? And they're like, well, you taught us about these lines on our back and how they shouldn't get further apart or closer together, and that we should be maintaining this, and and I'm like, okay, so what about all the exercises that we did today? How did those challenge your spine and how to keep your spine nice and safe? And they're like, well, we had to do this. And the fact that they could rhyme this off to me, I'm like, these kids are like 12 or 13 years old. And this is amazing. So now the coach was caught off guard and he didn't know what to say. So now they approached me and they're like, well, what else can we do? I'm like, what do you guys think you could do? And they're like, well, could we do this exercise and this exercise? I'm like, exactly. Would it challenge the same things that a sit-up would do? And they're like, yeah, it would. And I'm like, then you guys know what to do. And after that, I walked away. I'm thinking, to me, that is powerful, right? That's a job well done. And that's something that, now that gives me, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about that. And I'm like, that's what drives me forward to go and work every single day, is just knowing that in these kids, I made a huge difference. And now they understand that at their age, they've just found a much safer way to, a better way to keep their body safe and still get some of the things or the adaptations that we're trying to impose on them. So, and this is where I just think that we're not just strength and conditioning coaches. We're not just but we're educators, and this is what we are doing every single day.
I was going to ask you, which is kind of funny that you led to that, but I was going to ask you how do you commonly answer the question that we all get at some point in time in our lives as we're traveling, moving on? What do you do? And I love the fact that your response is an educator, because I absolutely think that that's what our roles are, despite what, ESPN or Sports Illustrated or the sort of inflation of salaries might be collegiately, professionally. At the end of the day, we should be teaching, we should be educating, we should be empowering. Yes, there's high pressures to perform and high stakes to perform, but at the end of the day, it should still be about educating the student athlete. And I just absolutely loved it. Made the hair on my arm stand up when you responded that way, because that's the same way that I respond when I'm traveling. I'm an educator, which then, most of them, what do you teach? And it's like, well, I teach athletes how to optimize their athletic potential. And they're like, oh, that's weird. Where do you teach that? And then it goes into a kind of a long about response of it. But as we kind of come towards the end of this show, I want to dive into just a couple more questions again, to sort of scratch my own itch, since I have you on your line, I have you on the line. But a lot of the listeners that might be listening to the Decoding Excellence shows is searching, is interested, is motivated by trying to truly encapsulate what excellence is. And I would love to hear, in your experience, in your career, what advice would you give your younger self or a younger coach getting into physical preparation, education, training athletes? What is that piece of advice that you might tell them?
Well, where do I start? No, I'd have to say that for myself, I guess one of the biggest things was, you have read Mindset by Carol Dweck?
Yes, great book.
Yeah, great, fantastic. I recommend that to so many people, and I can relate to myself back in high school. And this is the God's honest truth. I was a smart kid. I would have to say that I was lazy, and that things came very easy to me. But when it was time to put in the work, when I wasn't getting things, Derek tuned out. And Derek started to think that, again, the whole fixed mindset that this is as good as I was going to be, and I can't do the things that I want, and I'll have to leave those up to the people that are much smarter than me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'd even have to say, when I was going through my undergrad, sort of the same thing. It's just not really having much direction in the things that I wanted to do, not really sure what I wanted to do. I always knew what my interests were, but how to go about them was just something that, I wasn't sure of. And I guess the biggest thing for me is that, and again, I think it's just even going back to, we were saying earlier with interactions, is not being afraid to ask. And I think those are some of the things that I was afraid of doing in the beginning, was not talking to people to get more information, and just kind of, on the shy side, and just, because again, I had really no direction and stuff like that. But again, it's if we're searching for excellence, is always trying to find out the why, and and just asking people for, for advice and help, and because there are a lot of people out there who are willing to do that. And it's just something that, as silly as it sounds, like, Twitter, I think, is such a great platform for things like that, because there's so many different people you can reach out to who are always willing to help and lend a hand of some sort, or to provide some sort of direction. And it's always, not being afraid to answer maybe those burning questions you have inside you, and just trying to go and find those answers. And I guess if I had to look back at myself, is that, what, like, yeah, if there's all those things that you were curious about and things that you weren't sure of, is just to go and find out about them, and to ask, and gain that knowledge from people who have gone through it and stuff. And, I know what the purpose of your podcast here, which I think is fantastic, is, despite all the science side of things, let's get to know, about individuals, and what makes them click, and how we can actually help each other progress in this profession, not just from the profession side of things, but also, to help us grow as people and to become better every single day. And I guess maybe, like I said, searching for excellence is just trying to answer those questions. And maybe that's not the answer, but I know for me, it's just, now it's like, when I'm not sure of something, is I'm going to go and find out more about it, and just trying to progress from there. And how will this make me better? And I think sometimes asking other people for help, some may view it as a sign of weakness, but at the end of the day, if I don't ask for help, that information that I'm trying to find, I'm never going to know it. So to me, that's probably more of a sign of weakness, right? I guess I hope that makes sense.
No, I like, learned helplessness is obviously something that Carol Dweck talks quite a bit in that book.
Yep.
And I think it is one of the hallmarks of it is, an unwillingness to ask for help, and to sort of be isolated in this helplessness position. So I do think that that ability to ask for help when it comes up is something that I look at as a position of strength, because very much, people do not know that you need help unless otherwise you ask for it. And that seems a tendency that I've seen sort of across the board in society, is everybody sort of assumes that everything and everybody is doing okay unless somebody asks for help. But so many people, I think, are powerless or afraid to ask for it. So I definitely, my sort of paradigm of that has shifted to a position of strength. And for me as well, to kind of bridge on that response, is that, classically, one of the reasons why this show exists is so that not only do I have an opportunity to bring people like yourself on the show and get to know you and learn from your experiences and the things that have made you successful and excellent, but it's also a medium for me to work on the communication aspect of it. I am a classical, based on, and we could talk about the efficacy of the Myers-Briggs sort of personality profile, but I'm classically an INTJ. So like, as a borderline clinical introvert, it takes quite a bit for me to open up to other people and to share, despite, maybe what my Twitter looks like. This show is a medium of, this idea of trying to work on communication. And I think the high pressure stakes of putting a microphone and publishing this online is hopefully my attempt of sort of self-improvement in what is otherwise a challenging position. But because you referenced that book, I do want to say that another tremendous book that sort of, when you said, you found yourself kind of in this position where, when things got hard, that it wasn't like the easiest time. And granted, many years ago, which probably led you to this response and the position that where you're in now, as far as learning how to deal with it. But for the audience that might be listening to it, I think it's a great reference that if you've read Carol Dweck's book and you feel and you sort of wrapped your head around the ideas of learned helplessness and a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, Angela Duckworth's book called Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance is another tremendous read that I kind of feel like bridges on top of Carol Dweck's book as well, and one that I recommend to a lot of our own staff here, and former athletes and current athletes as well. I'd be curious to hear, first of all, with that, I know we've talked about, Carol Dweck's book and now just referencing Grit. Are there, I've had other guests on the show that talks about that learners are leaders, and that a common characteristic of people that lead and teach are just the proficiency and the sort of frequency of reading. Are there any books that you highly recommend to your students or to other people, or books that you've commonly given as presents, or anything that you commonly refer to?
Yeah, there are a few. Now, as far as reading goes, I'm really behind on my reading. I have a sister who last year her goal was to read 150 books in 1 year, and she got up to 135, I believe. And she's handed a lot of those over to me. So it may take me about 13 years to read all of those. But yeah, so I'm slowly but surely trying to get through some. But some of the good ones that I've really enjoyed is, apart from Carol Dweck's book, Their Mindset, is Legacy by James Kerr. And I think it's such a great read just for just about establishing culture and good culture. And if I would have to say, from a lot of the different environments I've worked in, is I think a lot of that is lacking, like a good, clear, common culture. So I know with my business and the staff that I bring on, that I really try to focus on that, and so I find that to be an amazing book. Another one that I really like is Atul Gawande's Checklist Manifesto. I just think that it's an amazing read. I just think having a checklist of things you do and how you go about your daily life, and just trying to, for me, it's to help stay organized and just to make sure that these are all the different things that I've gone through with every program, with every individual that I meet, kind of thing. Those are probably the other two that I really like to recommend. And like, there's so many other good ones out there and stuff, but those are probably the top three that I recommend to most people.
I have Legacy on my shelf that sits next to Urban Meyer's Above the Line, because I think those two books do a tremendous job at teaching and providing a pretty good framework for the development of high standards and building a culture of success in an organization. And I definitely agree with the Checklist Manifesto. And then, I know in my own sort of notes, as I'm, whether it's, for any reason, if I'm preparing a packet for my staff or whatever, the same sort of ideology that he includes, or the story he shares about Van Halen's Brown M&Ms, I always try to sneak something in there so that, I can tell whether or not they've actually read it. I think also for those that have read that book, that sort of story, resonates for a lot of different people. So great, tremendous books on that, by all means. Well, I want to respect your time. I don't want to keep you here for too much longer. I know that, a busy day, children running about, life and business, and it's, you already shared that, for most days it's from sun up to sundown. So when there are days, off, I always try to advocate for our own staff to get out of the gym, get away from here. Like, you need to have that work-life balance, and it's pervasive in this industry. I think I should get on social media. I should get on Twitter. I should read a book. I should read this article. I should do this. I should go to this workshop. But I also don't want our coaches to lose themselves in the process of really trying to be an excellent coach. So in respect of that, in respect of your time and that balance, I want to kind of put a bow tie on this thing. audience that is listening to this, number one, you do have a Twitter. It's ASI_strength. And that's where I first followed you. And I started to share and retweet and favorite a lot of your things. And then at one point kind of worked up the courage to be like, I need to have you on the show because I think the materials that you're sharing with what you're doing in your business and academically and elsewhere are tremendous. You need to be able to share this and continue to share this in a long form, not 140 character sort of fashion. So if there are other areas or ways, I mean, if you were to say, a request of the audience that have listened to the end of this podcast, what might that request be to them? And then to build on that, where can they find you? What's the best way of reaching you?
Yeah. So if anyone wants to get a hold of me, they can use my Twitter account, which I'm pretty active on Twitter. It becomes more for me. Twitter, I think, is an amazing resource. And again, it's like you said, this is how we connected. Just finding good people such as yourself who like to share information. So I like to post a lot of research papers that I've come across. Like to retweet a lot of things that researchers are putting out there. Sometimes just having some good dialogue with people talking about different topics, different concepts. So they can reach me through Twitter, like you said. So my Twitter handle is at ASI_strength. If people want to get a hold of me, maybe to even more than just 140 characters, like you said, they can reach me at my email address, which is derek@athleticsolutionsInc.com. So like I said, anything, I can help out. I'm willing to help people out in any way that I can. And if I can't, then, steer them into the direction of the people who can. So those are probably the two best ways for people to get a hold of me.
Yeah, excellent. And I'll make sure that I include your Twitter and resources in the show notes so that the audience members could find what you're posting and begin to follow you on Twitter. Probably won't plug your email so that you don't get hit up by spam and have advertisements come to your email box. But that will all be included in the show notes. So, Derek, I cannot thank you enough for coming on the Decoding Excellence show and spending a little time and investing it here, and just your experiences with the various organizations, your experience with working with youth athletes up to 20s, up to older, your academic experiences, the successes, the things that you have found to be instrumental in your career, I think can be a tremendous resource that the audience listening to this show can walk away from this podcast and begin to start to formulate their own ideas as how to navigate an otherwise cloudy world of strength conditioning and athletic performance potential. So thank you for coming on, Derek. I appreciate it. And until next time, man, let's connect again.
Yeah, absolutely, Adam. Thanks for having me on. It was a real pleasure chatting with you about this. Hopefully the audience has quite a few takeaways from and stuff. But no, this was amazing, and I really appreciate all the work that you do. I think you're a pretty stand-up guy. You put yourself out there, and you know what? People are going to be better because of it. So. Hey,
I appreciate it, man. And until next time, let's reconnect.
Sounds good, my friend. Take care.
Thank you. I want to thank Coach Derek Salvador for coming on the Decoding Excellence show. I took a lot away from this conversation, including some of the differences between training U10s and U20s, and the ideology that the higher you advance in sport, the more difficult it becomes. I couldn't agree less with that statement in the aspect of trying to wrangle and train under 10s is a difficulty and a challenge that many coaches probably won't have embraced, and one that you should try because it really forces you to become a better coach and use better cueing to capture their attention span. This is a wide-ranging conversation, and his thoughts as far as training and the enrichment of the academic process involving kinesiology students in strength and conditioning and the design and differences of modalities is one that I will apply to Wichita State and continue to try to grow our internship program. Coach shared tremendous insights in his experiences, and like always, this show is about truly understanding what goes into making an excellent coach, the intangibles, the behaviors, the tactics, tools, and techniques that coaches utilize to become expert at what they do and a master of their craft. Like always, this show is designed to truly understand and dive deep into the intangibles of excellent coaches. And until next time, this is the Decoding Excellence Show. Thank you.